Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the New Jersey Film Festival Fall 2021 Filmmaker Q&A. Today, we have a wonderful documentary filmmaker, Thomas Verrette, here on hand to talk about his really absolutely exceptional documentary, Zero Gravity. And we have Amit Bachani as well as Hamsa Hasan, who are festival jurors, who also really like the movie. So we're all here to talk to Thomas about his great film. Before we begin, I just want to let folks know how they can purchase tickets. So I'm going to share screen for a second and make sure folks know how they can get access to us. Normally, you would end up hitting njfilmfest.com. You look at the lawn sign behind me, it's got the information there too while we're doing the Q&A. So if you want to write it down, you go to njfilmfest.com. Normally everything would be here, but our film festival has morphed into a hybrid film festival, which means that we will be doing live screenings as well as video on demand. You know, the pandemic is still raging. Who knows what's going to happen with the Delta variant? We may have to cancel our live screenings, but we always have the fallback of the remote online video on demand version. The video on demand version will have the films available for 24 hours on their show date. And normally when you would come to this page, you would see everything open up for you here. But because we're partnering with Eventive as our streaming platform, we now have a base there. So when you get to this page, you click on the blue link, which will send you to our catalog page. And to purchase tickets for any of the shows, you would just click on the picture. So here's Zero Gravity. And you can see that as I hit this, there's a pre-order button, that pre-order now button that pops up. You can also click on the photo and it gives you basic information about the movie and the director and how long it is and all that stuff. And you would just click on the pre-order now button and you could purchase tickets. If you wanted other general information, just click around on all the buttons. This is our welcome page. And you want to buy a festival pass, it's $100. You save like $75 and you get access to everything. Individual tickets are, of course, back to the catalog page, and they're $15 each. You want to get general information about the movies, there's the film guide page, tells you about all the movies. You just click on those, the ones that you're interested in. And if you want to get a kind of linear version, you just can scroll down through all of the movies with pictures and descriptions. And if you want to buy tickets again, you just click on the blue link at the top. So Zero Gravity is playing on Friday, September 24th. I just stopped sharing. And it'll be available to watch starting at 12:01, so the minute after midnight on Friday the 24th. And it'll be available to watch all day and night up till 11:45 p.m. And let's say you started watching at 11 o'clock and you can't finish it because you got sleepy. You can continue watching the next day. So you need to start watching it, and then you have an additional 24 hours to finish it. If you decide to watch it video on demand, let's say you watch it early in the day and you really like the film and you want to see it on our huge screen in Voorhees Hall 105 on the Rutgers campus, Rutgers University campus at 71 Hamilton Street in New Brunswick, New Jersey. You'll already be on the list, so you can watch it live and video on demand. It's $15 to be able to do either one of those things. Plus, you'll have access to this wonderful Q&A with Thomas that we're going to be doing now. And that's an added perk because all of the video Q&As are sent to ticket buyers and festival pass buyers. So anyway, enough of the background on the festival. We are celebrating our 40th anniversary. Yes, I've been running this thing for that long. I feel like, yes, the gray hairs weren't there when I started back in 1982, but we're celebrating our 40th anniversary, and Thomas Verrette's film, Zero Gravity, is a wonderful documentary film about a bunch of middle school kids that are producing code to be used on the space station, which I thought was a really wonderful premise. Tell us how you got involved in this movie, Thomas. How did you get into this thing?
That's a good question. My executive producer, he had a connection with MIT and sort of pitched this idea to me about going and seeing if we could make a story out of the Zero Robotics program, which is what you see in the film. And so it kind of all began with just a hunch. And I basically went to the orientation in California for all the new teachers. And that's kind of almost when I really found out about how like involved the whole competition was, how big it was, that it was nationwide. And I sort of just became enraptured on that day. There was very little prep for the film. It really was just like we found out about what was happening for the summer, and I flew up to San Jose and shot for a day. And we kind of from there had about a month until the program actually began with all the schools. And so that was basically crunch time for us to figure out how many days we could shoot and budget, and that's essentially how it all began. And of course, though, being a documentary, it sort of takes
Life of its own. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. But this is a 4-year in the making project, correct?
Yes, yeah. We shot in 2017 for predominantly, what you see in the film. And at the time, we weren't sure that there was a feature to be made. It was in a way, Zero Robotics has a high school competition as well that's global. And that one runs much longer in the fall, and the ISS finals for that one is usually in like January. And so the idea for the middle school competition was find out what the story was, and maybe we could develop a series, a docu-series to produce related to the high school competition. What ended up happening, though, is even though I sort of the initial objective was to create a 15-minute short. I kind of shot so much material, and the kids became so enraptured with the program and the journey that they went on that it just kind of changed over the course of shooting it. And then part of the reason why it took 4 years to make is really just because this is like a passion project of mine. It's been something that I financed myself and worked on it when I could. And after we shot, I was working on a World Cup documentary that took up almost 3 years of my life. And so it wasn't until the pandemic kind of shut everything down that I finally really had no excuse to not have finished this project that's been, in my head and what I've been thinking about, because the experience never left me, and so the project never did either. It was just about finding enough time and energy and sort of just not getting bothered in a way. And so that the silver lining of the pandemic for me was that I was able to make this film, and honestly, I may have not made it quite as well through this whole pandemic without being so kind of involved and I was like reacting to what these kids were like kind of experiencing and their own dreams and inspiration. It was very therapeutic kind of in a way to kind of go through that year and just be constantly reminded that there is hope at the end of the tunnel, So I guess that's a long-winded answer.
No, it's perfectly reasonable answer. In fact, for us, we had to transition too, and I was very nervous about what is the film festival going to look like, and we postponed our summer festival, and then ended up, well, we'll try this after talking to other film festival directors around the country. I said, well, you can use Eventive. They do a really great job. I said, okay. So we took all the movies that we selected for the summer because we were ready to show them, but we didn't know if we weren't going to have an audience. And then we lumped them into our fall festival, because the New Jersey Film Festival is a biannual festival, fall and spring. And then we have a New Jersey International Film Festival that takes place in the summer. So we had this huge festival in the fall, and people actually came. We had people from all over the world watching our films. That's why we maintained the online presence, because that way people who are far away want to see the movies can because they found out about us. So I think the
Yeah.
pandemic has been horrible, but there's
Yeah.
been some good things like your movie that have come from them. So
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank God for the festivals continue. I mean, that was obviously a sort of an unknown process for myself as well as every other filmmaker out there. That's like, what do we do with our films that we can't share? So it has been a blessing as well that we've been able to do that despite kind of being in quarantine for a long time. And obviously, it's getting a little better now, but it might not be by the time we the
fingers
festival
crossed.
starts.
Yeah, yeah. Well, who
um,
knows? The virus is so powerful, and you can't take anything for granted, and people's safety is the most important thing. So anyway, Amit, why don't you ask a question of Thomas?
Sure. Right off the bat, I think I really loved that, like, compared to some of the other documentaries we got in the festival, this, like, particular one had so much heart to it. The kids are so bright. And I feel like a lot of documentaries that try tackling, like, this kind of subject, like sort of like an academic competition, it's like very one-dimensional versus this one. I feel like you really get to see, like, the emotional journeys of everyone involved. You got to speak to Tanner and all these people. So like, were there any particular obstacles you encountered in gaining access to them? Because the kids seem like really, like, they seem very, I think camera friendly is the wrong word, but they seem very engaged with, like, the making of everything. So was it a challenge for you in that respect?
that's a good question. I suppose that the hardest part about making a documentary, especially with kids, is sort of developing the relationship with them and their family to trust you, that you're going to, share their story honestly and with compassion yourself. And I never, I mean, we shot with small cameras in the beginning. They were definitely a little bit more like, what's going on? Why, why are you guys following us? But it only took about a week, I think, before they kind of just opened up and thought that it was amusing that we were there. And they would often forget that we were there, and then just like all of a sudden, in the middle of like a perfect moment, I'd be capturing something, and then they would like look at you and realize that you're still there, and like that was the kind of the heart. Maybe some of the challenges of the editorial process was making sure that the film lived in the moment, because every once in a while they would break, just because they're kids, but I didn't find that part of it as challenging as just making sure that I was in the right place at the right time, honestly, always, because there's no redos, obviously, in documentary filmmaking, and in particular with kids. It's like if they did something fantastic or said something great that that you is gonna maybe make the cut, or at least has a good chance of, but you weren't, you were whipping or just, I mean, that was kind of where all the nerve-wracking side of it came from, and particularly as we went along, and and then like the finals and with the ISS and everything, that was definitely complicated and stressful to sort of capture all that, but still give the kids the feeling of like that it's all for fun, you know what I mean, so that they could enjoy it and not be too involved in the filmmaking itself.
Thomas, tell our viewers what they're going to be seeing when they're seeing Zero Gravity. I mean, we've kind of, I guess people could read the description, but maybe if it came from the filmmaker, it would make more sense.
Sure. So Zero Gravity is the story of three young students in San Jose, California, who get involved in a nationwide competition to code satellites aboard the International Space Station. And the story kind of takes a journey with them, through their lives in some cases, and through their, their past, their cultures, their dreams, and follows them all the way from just being completely amateurs and having never coded before to programming satellites that end up being kind of officiated by astronauts aboard the space station in real time.
That's perfect. That's the tagline.
Yeah,
You
I'll
can
have to
al-
write that one down.
you also have to say that it's also about their teacher too, because I think he also has his personal stories also included. Correct?
That's true. Yes. The story does focus a bit on Tanner, who is their teacher, who also um, was never he had never coded or done any of that before. And so one of the fascinating parts of the story for I think me and as well as adults is actually seeing how an adult can wrap their head around these things, and actually how much easier it is for kids sometimes to do it, just because they're sponges. And yeah, but one of the things that on that point with when it comes to the teacher is he ends up his grandfather ended up working for NASA and built parts for the space station as well. That was something that came out later in the process of us making the film, and so that was a little bit of kind of like a light bulb moment where it just felt like sort of like the universe was sort of creating this movie for me in a way.
Yeah, you had
Yeah.
a genie coming to your rescue. We get those too.
So yeah, I mean, that's the beauty of filmmaking sometimes, I guess. But yeah.
Wonderful. How about you, Hamsa?
Um, your film does definitely like very wonderfully balance the personal lives of the people involved and the competition and how intriguing it is and the importance of it and like teaching kids how to code because it's kind of like the language of the future. I would love to know, aside from the teacher and paying attention to him, I'd love to know how you chose to pay attention to the three students that were kind of the main students that you focused on. Like, did that happen? You were like, okay, from early in the process of film making, were like, oh, those are the three students who we're going to focus on, or did it happen later in post-production? I'd love to know why those students in particular and how that kind of came together as a decision, which ended up being very well for the film.
Yeah, it's a really good question. The choice of who to follow was sort of an organic process. I did interview and on multiple occasions most of the students in the class, but especially in the beginning, just to get a sense of who they were, what they liked, and but some of the other kids were less interested in the program and more just there for fun, for friendships and things like that, and they were all fascinating in their own ways. It really just was, what was interesting to me is that in the beginning I did maybe like around like the second week, I had decided on the main three students, Advic, Adrian, and Carol, but I didn't know that they were going to be the three main students but like in the big coding scene where they're, it's sort of like hitting the deadline. Like those three, in particular, Carol and Advic were sort of like, the main kind of thrust behind the whole program that they were creating. That was just things that you don't really know. I mean, I knew Carol in particular, like she kind of had this leadership quality, but that kind of came about over the course of the program. It wasn't, these things were sort of like, they sort of all blossomed through the process, and it was a little bit of luck, honestly, how it all kind of came together that way.
The three kids are wonderful, and I think you do recognize the fact that they have leadership qualities, and I think the fact that Michaela also transitioned to Adrian, which I thought, the audience doesn't know that. They only know that if they see the Q&A that you did for another program, which I said, wait, that's so anyway, that's
Yeah.
something folks won't know about if they watch the movie. But the interesting thing is you went and revisited with them 3 years after the interviews, and you could see how the kids have matured. And it's a very interesting thing that we will make available to our audience too, so they can see that as well. But I think the three kids all come from challenging backgrounds, and I think perhaps that was the link that made your documentary a little bit easier to make, right? I think You focus
Yeah.
on these three kids and the backgrounds that they have. Two of them are immigrants and they're outsiders, and even Michaela feels like an outsider as well for her own personal reasons. So I think, was that something that was consciously done, or it just happened that way?
You know, it's one of those things where, like, where we were and the district, you know, there's a lot of kids in that school that are on, you know, paid for lunches and things like that. And it was, you know, one of the objectives of the program itself is to kind of get students involved in STEM at an early age that may not have access to certain opportunities otherwise. That was an aspect of the story that I did want to showcase, because I just think that is important for you know, as many students, no matter where they come from or their backgrounds or genders, you know, to have the same opportunities.
Yeah.
And but I didn't want to make I didn't want to make the movie about that. I wanted it to be honest and come from the perspectives of you know, the kids and Tanner, and be honest. You know, to me, I didn't know that the film and the program and the kids were going to get as involved as they did. I mean, you know, and so it's a blessing that they did, obviously, for the sake of making a film.
Right.
But they're the ones who kind of tell their own stories and give you know, credence to those ideas without me doing that as much. And that was important for me as well, is to, because, you know, we're talking about education in a way being done well. And that's something that we don't see very often. A lot of the things that we kind of witness, especially these days, is just like all the problems that are everywhere. And every once in a while, it's kind of nice to just see something and be reminded that there are people and programs and initiatives that are trying to make a difference. And so that's kind of where my direction came from. It was just, you know, how are these kids going to feel about this stuff? You know, what have they overcome already at 10 and 11 years old? And how does this maybe give them more confidence and opportunities to pursue in the future? And that's kind of, that for me was, you know, from that perspective where I was coming from. Because the overall objective of working as a team is universal. You know, how do we do this together?
Makes sense. Amit, your turn.
So I kind of have like a bit of a technical question, but like it kind of goes along with what we just talked about. Personally, one of the things I really loved about your documentary is kind of like the way it's shot. Like, in the sense you get very intimate personal stories, but you also kind of expertly tie it into this whole collective journey of people learning a new skill and kind of preparing themselves to be like these next generation of leaders. So was there like, I know your DOP, I think Carlos Marilanda, if I said the last name right.
Yep.
So was there like any specific discussions with him on how you wanted to film the family, or kind of like the space footage that you get in? Because, you know, we kind of go everywhere from California and we have footage on the moon and the control room. So how did that like kind of go about?
Yeah. When it came to the classroom, that was interesting. I think the first day in orientation, I believe it was, it was just Carlos with the camera. And that was the first time where, you know, we got to work together kind of and see how are we going to cover this stuff. What I came away with after that day was that we need 2 cameras, because I knew we were going to be in the classroom shooting the kids, and I didn't know at the time there was going to be 3 main students. But, you know, to think about the complications of having 4 main characters constantly in a room together and only 2 cameras even was quite difficult. So what we ultimately did is just, you know, we did decide to be intimate and to, you know, try to shoot it in a way that almost as much as possible maybe didn't feel like wide shots and just staged, you know, I mean, like really just try to get close and feel like we're with the students, the kids, even the astronauts as much as possible. That eventually turned into like a second hand, where it's like if Carlos was shooting one angle, I would just immediately go and shoot the other one, like who somebody was talking to. And it became one of those really just amazing kind of working relationships where we almost didn't talk that much about it after a while. And it just sort of became natural. And then eventually we did add multiple cameras, like for the finals and things like that, where we had crews in like 4 different locations simultaneously. And for that, we had shot enough of the film that I basically made a giant guide of what to and not to do for the other crews. And they basically, knocked it out of the park. And then when it came to the NASA and archive, I mean, that's a lot of that was just, what's available. Although, of course, it's curated specifically for the film to try to feel as similar to the way we were shooting on the ground as possible, since unfortunately, Carlos and I have not yet made it to space.
Hamsa, we have time for your question, and then I'll ask one more, and that we'll have to wrap up.
So, through an interview process, just through interviews in general, moments tend to come up where it's kind of something so organic and so just like unexpected, but you want to include it in the film just straight away, usually when you conduct an interview. I want to know, what was like an interview moment that while you were interviewing them, you knew this had to go into the film? It's such a beautiful like moment, or something that they said that you were like, it kind of sparked and you like had to have it in the film.
Yeah, I think there was 2. Actually, well, these aren't interviews, but they're maybe the couple of the moments that as they were happening, you just sort of, there's actually quite a few. The first one I think would be when we were with Carol and she was talking about the unicorn. That was just kind of one of those fantastic metaphors that you knew that you would be able to create something with, that came about completely organically in the moment. Another one was Advix. I don't even know if I asked him specifically about the moon. I think I just asked him what his favorite thing about space was. And he went on this beautiful, like kind of thought about the moon landings and how inspiring that was. That was something that really got me. And then as well as when Adrian talks about global warming, and I remember specifically that moment because we weren't even talking about that. We were talking about something else entirely, and I tended to conduct the interviews less like question answers and more just like conversations. That was my style of how to kind of loosen people up and make it a little less awkward for the kids in particular. And yeah, there was something about that, like, they started to just open up as we went on about things they cared about because of the conversations we had. And there's a lot of beautiful moments, but those 3, I think I remember very, very specifically being like, wow, okay, there it is.
I got misty quite a few times in your movie. And I think, listening to Adrian talk about global warming and, we need to make sure we do this. And I think it was heartening to me to know that young people were feeling committed towards making the world a better place in a variety of different ways. And I also like the fact that you had astronauts participating, Steve Smith and Katie Coleman, and I didn't realize that there was a Star Wars connection as well. That the sphere that they're coding is linked to the object that Luke is in the very first Star Wars or Star Wars 4. He's being taught how to fight this thing without having his eyes on, and that became the sphere that they're moving around. So I thought that was very cool too. But anyway, I want to thank you, Thomas and Amit and Hamsa, for being part of this Q&A, and hope folks will come and check out your wonderful movie Zero Gravity at the New Jersey Film Festival on September 24th, 2021, our 40th anniversary festival. And you need more information, you go to our website, njfilmfest.com. And as I showed you guys at the beginning of this Q&A, how to get tickets, you can go and spread the word to everyone so they can make sure they see this great film. Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.